right. So I set it so there's no live chat this time because the live chat was a little bit of a wild card.
Yes.
Yeah, and for now I think we're going to stick to YouTube. I kind of want to get the painful stuff out of the way really quick.
Mhm. Mhm.
Um so yeah, like we're probably not going to address the musical that will not be named anymore like moving forward, but there's like a few final thoughts, especially after we did publish some videos on YouTube about this and got feedback from people who only really had seen us do it that way. And yeah, so I know there was one comment you wanted to speak to, and we got a reply to it that was pretty thorough right before
Oh
we got
yeah.
done.
Yeah, there was a really nice person that was just like ranting in a good way 'cause
Hmm.
like they were just mad that that like the part of that comment that I thought was really nice was that they were like, I have this video paused because I'm so mad before I even find out what happened.
Hmm.
And I'm like, that's a nice response to
Yeah.
have instead of what we were getting before. Um, but the comment that I got that I really liked, that was something I thought we could talk about, was somebody was pointing out how people were like moralizing what you like, and by that being like something is good or something is bad. And that was something that I noticed. I've noticed this in general, but I noticed this when we were talking about Epic is like when I put in like Epic the musical on TikTok, one of the top like things is Epic the musical is bad.
Mhm,
And I like clicked on that the other day just to see, because I knew there was other people that had been harassed by the fandoms. I was just trying to find things that other people had said to
mhm,
see like what they said that made them freak out like that, but I couldn't find anything because they probably deleted their videos. Um, but I just know that it's happened to other people before, and so whatever. But I kept getting like comments like that, like, "Why do you think Epic is bad?" Like people in my DMs would DM me and be like, "Why do you think Epic is bad?" Or like even like some of the videos that were like talking about me, they would be like, "You can't say that you think that something is bad because it talks about controversial subjects," which like that wasn't what I was saying anyway.
mhm,
But I was like, why are you acting like this is so black and white? Where like if something is something, one thing happens in something and suddenly it's all shit and
mhm,
there's nothing redeemable in it anymore. And like the way that people react to it, it's like you are a bad person if you like something. And it's like media is not like that. Like
mhm,
part of me wonders if the reason why people have this obsession that drives me insane of trying to make villains not villainous is because they're trying to find a way for them to be good people. We've said this before, because they like them
mhm,
or they like empathize with them, and so they want to make them, they're like, well, if I empathize with this villain, they can't be a villain because then that would make me a villain.
mhm,
And I know that like the amount of people that said I had no media literacy in the last like 2 weeks is a lot, and I'm like, actually, I have always excelled at that since I was a young child.
mhm,
um but the other thing that I excel at that I feel like is lacking is reading comprehension, or just
mhm,
like understanding media. And that sounds like I'm talking down to people, but I'm not meaning to. But it's just like, just because something is, if there's a character in something that is like messed up or doing messed up things or hurting people or whatever, and you enjoy it, it doesn't mean that you're a bad person or that you enjoy them doing bad things, because they're a character.
mhm.
They're a character in something. That doesn't make you a bad person, but people respond to you as if it does. Like, um, the Percy Jackson fandom never been as unhinged as the Epic fandom has, but some people, when they defend Luke, it sounds like they're defending themselves. And it's like, you're not actually defending yourself, though. You can enjoy a character like Luke, who is like going off the rails and killing people and not caring that he's doing something that is morally wrong. You can enjoy him as a character without like co signing the things that he is doing,
Mhm.
especially if you recognize that he is the villain and you recognize that, you know, you're not supposed to like that person. I see this sort of stuff happen a lot on, like, book talk discussions, like, people talk about books that have, like, darker themes, and they act like if you like those books, then that is, like, a moral judgment of your character personally,
Mhm.
and that's just not true, and it's also just a very weird thing for it's very weird to have people who say that they hate me also be like, "Why do you think this is bad?" And it's like, "Why do you care what I think?" Like, if you don't like me, if you don't like me enough to send me harassing comments, and then even after those are off, leave comments about me on other people's videos, and then after that, send me a mean DM telling me that I'm a horrible person, why do you care what I think about this thing that you enjoy? And it's like, they need me to say that it's good or something, or to be so unhinged that they, like, can just ignore what I say, because it's like there's this part of them that's like, "What if the thing that I like is bad and that makes me a bad person?" And it's like, that doesn't make you a bad person, though.
Mm.
Like, if you enjoy Epic for what it is, like, if you think it's fun to watch Odysseus turn into a monster, um, because he loves his wife and that somehow turns him into a monster, which is essentially the general that's the only thing I can think of is, like, the general, like, thesis, analysis, whatever of like Epic. If you enjoy that story because it's different from what you usually get to see, or you just enjoy it, there's nothing wrong with you. Like, I can't enjoy it because there's things about it that are too difficult for me. I also like Odysseus and Penelope for how they are in this original story, and
Mhm.
so I don't like how it was changed. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with you if you do. And it's just such a weird thing to see people being so angry at you and then coming back and being like, "But why don't you like this thing? Like, can you explain to me why you don't like it?" And it's like, what do
Yeah.
you mean?
And
why
they don't
why
even want you to explain it so that you can give your reasons and be heard. They want you to explain it so that they can argue against it. And like nothing explains that more than someone who you were talking to in my comments who responded, "Okay, so what are your so-called reasons for not liking it?" And it's like, "Bro, the fact that you started with so-called reasons
Mhm,
shows that you were in no way going to accept whatever reasons followed."
mhm. And like some of the videos that I saw that just showed up on my FYP. I wasn't even looking for them. I just like was forced to see them because thanks TikTok. Now I know for sure that when people are being harassed online that they see videos about themselves. Because if I saw videos about myself, people with much bigger profiles also have to sit there and see all the videos that people are making about them. That's that it's horrible. Like, because you're like afraid of your For You page. Like, I still, like, am, like, afraid of it. I don't, like, go on it as much as I usually do because I don't wanna see a video pop up about me.
Mhm.
It's so weird, and but either way, like, a lot of those videos, people were, like, talking to me in them if they were ones, like, talking to me, even though, like, they didn't, like, tag me or anything in them, as if I we were having an argument. Like that one animation video I like reposted a couple of times to like disprove the wild arguments they said about me. Like they were responding to me even when I was in the comments being like, half of your video you're just lying about me of things that are easily disprovable if you actually watched any of the videos on my account. And you're just keeping the video up on your page for like an entire over a week now, even though you know that half of it is a total lie and you don't care. Like, this is so weird that you're doing this, and that you know that none of this is true, but you're just keeping it up anyway. Out That's so strange. But that person was like making an argument against me, and they said that they didn't take the video down because they wanted me to make a video like with a better argument. And it was like, do you know that I don't know you and that I don't care what you think? Like, why do you think that I care what you think? I don't mean to be mean, but it's all like, you're a complete stranger. Why would you put together this entire video saying why you disagree about whether
Take the time
Penelope is
to
a strong.
animate it and everything. Like,
Yeah, and like the part of the video that seemed to make them the most upset is that I said I didn't think that Penelope was given the opportunity to be like a strong character, as strong as she is in the Odyssey. I still say that.
Mhm.
And they one thing about that I never even mentioned was that they were talking about being a victim as if that makes you less than. And I was like, Go fuck off, bro." That you think being a victim makes you less than. That doesn't make you weak or anything like that. But it was just like a very weird experience to see, like, not only him but also the people that were in his comments for the videos that he made about me. He made a video just like posting like the comments that I left him when we were arguing, when I was like, "What are you talking about?" But it was just very strange to see somebody make a video like that who's never seen any of my content before ever. And they're acting like we're in the middle of a discussion. And it's like, I don't know you. I don't care if you don't agree with me.
Mhm.
And it's a very weird thing to like not take a video down that you know isn't true about someone because you want to make them challenge you in an argument. Like, why would I do that? And like, especially right in the middle of being harassed, you want me to make more content? Like, I'm not playing these games with the internet.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna like fall into that back and forth trap. I'm especially not gonna make content when I'm like triggered and really upset and emotional. I'm gonna make it a week later when I've been able to like calm down and plan things out and make things in a way that makes sense. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
fall into that trap of reacting like social media wants you to do, which just leads to more problems. I'm not gonna do that. But it was just like a very weird thing that people were acting like this was an argument. Like most of the people that DM'd me and or commented to me in the times when my comments have been on are people that are like challenging me. They're acting like the my opinion about this is up for discussion. And I'm like, it is not.
Yeah.
Like, this is just my opinion. This is what I think. I don't like how he handled this very like reactionary, very, private to me, but also just like very personal thing. And that has happened to me before. I don't like how he handled it. And that the way that he handled that ruined everything else that I could have ever wanted to like hear from him. Like I would give him more chances um when it comes to like future projects and stuff because he is very young.
Mhm.
um if that hadn't happened, that makes it where I'm like, you're not a safe person for me to watch content from. And
Yeah.
by that I mean, like, I don't know if his content is going to trigger the hell out of me out of nowhere. I'm not going to watch content like that if I am afraid of that. Like, I don't watch Quentin Tarantino movies for the same reason. He always shows women being raped in some way or being horribly sexually abused or something out of nowhere, and so I don't watch those movies because I don't want to see that. um and like that's just people that I avoid. And so it's like, that's fine. If you don't have the same things as me, you can enjoy it still, then go for it. I just don't know why. It's very odd, I guess, to see fandom spaces like this, especially that are like so ardently like protecting him, like very protective of the creator. Um, but then also be so insecure. Like, why are you so obsessive about him, but also very insecure about how good it is at the same time? Because me making a video shouldn't like make your entire argument fall apart,
Yeah.
or make you feel like you're what you think is so wrong that you need to literally make up arguments that of things that I never said in order to make the points that I'm trying to make not sound as legitimate. Um, that person who made that comment that made us want to talk about this, like, she pointed out in that comment, she was like, "You're a survivor, and Mandy has a little degree in this. There's like literally nothing about the two of you that people can just say you're wrong."
Yeah.
Like, we obviously know what we're talking about. And so it's like, if people watch you guys say this stuff and they literally have to, the person was saying, like, they have to make something up to
Mhm.
try to disprove you, because otherwise there isn't anything there that they can disprove that easily, because we know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
And it is like, it's just so weird to see people be so insecure that like a random stranger who they've never seen before, because they didn't even know about our Calypso videos, so they
Mhm.
never saw anything we ever posted before,
No.
go so over the line to make us sound like crazy little bitches, and or just be wrong. And it's so weird. Like, when I see videos of people who talk about Percy Jackson and have opinions that I don't like, yeah, of course I get a little bit upset because that's like something personal to me. But if I see their videos enough, I just block them.
Mhm,
And like sometimes we talk about the things that they say to like talk about why we don't agree with them, but we don't make it personal to them.
mhm,
Like I usually don't even like stitch their videos. Usually I'll make like a video about somebody, about something that I saw somebody say, but I don't even put them in it because it's not about them personally. It's about what they were talking about and why I don't agree with what they were saying or whatever. It's not
mhm.
about the individual person. Um I can never imagine a world where I would like post a video making fun of like even the most ardent of Luke supporters, and like laughing at them being harassed and like enjoying watching it happen and calling them babies for not enjoying it. That's just such, I can't imagine ever doing that. Even to people that are really mean to me, like the people who were doing that to me, I wouldn't ever want them to go through the same thing.
Yeah.
And it's just so odd. I have noticed this about like Gen Z. The thing that I wanted to say about that is I feel like it's because they grew up with social media and they don't remember a time without it. They are so afraid of doing something that is wrong
Mm,
or bad that will get them canceled, that they are constantly afraid that
mhm.
they are going to do something or already have done something that will make people turn against them because they are now bad and wrong and cancelable and no one will ever speak to them again. And they are so harsh with like the people around them. Like I make one video and they decide that I need to be like buried into the ground until I can't handle life anymore for the better part of 2 weeks. Um that is such like a harsh like harshal like punishment sort of way. That means that you're just as harsh with yourself.
Mhm.
Stop being so mean to yourselves where you're like you're making it like you're not allowed to ever make a mistake or like do anything wrong. That is literally, it's impossible.
Mhm.
You cannot live that way. And if you're looking for characters in media that never do anything wrong ever and never make any mistakes, you're never going to enjoy anything because that would be really fucking boring.
Yeah.
And it would also be boring to have like a writer, an artist, whatever you want to call them, that is also falls under that category. Like,
Mhm.
the fun of following people for a long time, especially, is watching them improve and progress and get better.
Mhm.
Jorge's a young. He's so young. He's only 26 now. That is a baby still. Um, there's a lot that he could do in the future. And if you allow him to be critiqued and to, like, actually improve.
Yeah.
And that's, like, the thing that I think is so wild about all this is, like, let him improve. Like, this is the first thing that he's ever written. Do you really think that the very first thing somebody ever wrote when they were, like, a junior in college is gonna be the best thing they ever wrote in the history of their life? Like, that's kind of depressing to think that the best art you ever made was when you were, like, 22. I know that a lot of people who like this are young, so you might not have perspective about that, but you are so young. You
Yeah.
are a baby when you are like, imagine, like, Charlie from Percy deciding to write a musical about the Odyssey next year. He will be 21 next year. He will be the age that Jorge was when he started writing it. That is so young. You have a you there's so many things you just haven't experienced in life yet.
Mhm.
And so, like, there's a lot that he can improve on with a lot of his art as I'm sure he himself would want to. I just want the people who follow him to let him do that and
Yeah.
like let people bring stuff up that he can work on. Because any artist wants to work on things as you're constantly wanting to improve. You get bored when you feel like you've like plateaued and you can't go any further. That's when you start doing something else. And so I'm sure he wants to be able to do that. So if the only thing stopping you from allowing him to do that is that you feel like it'll be make you a bad person if he's not like a perfect human being and he hasn't made like a perfect work of art that has no flaws, then that's like more your thing than anything having to do with him.
Yeah. Well, and on the note, so the comment we got was talking about how people feel like if they like something that isn't morally perfect, that says something about their own morals. And we can speak to that a lot as like millennials because a lot of humor growing up when like we were growing up anyway had whatever ism in it that you can think of.
Yeah.
Sexism, ableism, misogyny, and we kind of still enjoy some of those moments from childhood, some of those things that we watched, despite that, knowing it's wrong. Like knowing
Mhm.
like I don't agree this part didn't age well. Like these are not jokes that one of my shows that I watch on repeat is My Name is Earl. Like that show is very problematic. And I do like to think, had they continued it, Earl would have a storyline where he's like meeting trans people and like becoming more accepting. But that's just me. And
I
yeah.
thought you were gonna say Seventh Heaven.
Oh my gosh. Well, Seventh Heaven also would probably still, I feel like Seventh Heaven would be interesting these days. Yeah.
Oh my god, I don't even want to think about that. It would be so funny,
Yeah.
like so funny. But yeah, there's it's not like a bilateral thing like that. Like I don't know the right word. It's not like good or bad. That's like very black and white. There's a lot of like middle ground where that is. Like you can enjoy something that has people saying problematic things or whatever, especially if the art that is being made about them is like pointing things out about why they are problematic, for instance,
Mhm.
or whatever. You can just enjoy the even things that aren't. You can still find things to enjoy about them and kind of figure it out. Like, yeah, sometimes it goes over a line where you just like can't enjoy it anymore because it's too much or like too bad or whatever. Where it kind of like there's always a point with me where like something goes too far and it like ruins the enjoyment I had of it and I just can't enjoy it anymore, so I just don't watch it anymore.
Mhm.
But that doesn't happen all the time.
Yeah.
It's like some of the fun stuff to watch is like just fun bad movies. They're
Mhm.
like bad on purpose and you still enjoy them because they're still really fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like it's just you as long as you understand like or you're like aware, that's always like the big battle. Is
Mhm.
like as long as you're like aware of what the original kind of intent was of the characters of the story or whatever.
Mhm.
Um Even if you realize that the creator like like when we talk about Harry Potter,
Mhm.
there are accounts that we like and enjoy that I'm going to have to find soon because they're on TikTok of people who like literally like rip apart every single thing about Harry Potter in a good way, like point out like why it's lacking, like why it's a problem, why the world how the world doesn't make sense. And so like even though they're being like very negative about something or Harry Potter has become such a horrible thing because of JK Rowling,
Mhm.
people can still talk about it in that way and still enjoy it and find something about it to talk about. And nobody is like, being like you're a horrible person
Mhm.
for still talking about Harry Potter because they're talking about it in this context.
Yeah.
They're not like celebrating JK Rowling or trying to downplay people's like, critique of her as a person or anything like that. They're talking about it to critique her on purpose.
Mhm.
And so there's just a lot of gray area with this stuff. It's not as simple as, oh, well, this. I feel like it's like, oh, well, they made like a racist joke in this movie, so now all of it is over.
Mhm.
And it's like it's not that simple all the time. It really depends on how they present the thing in the first place.
Yeah.
And like, are they showing them to be bad people? Then it's fine.
Mhm.
Like it gets weird when people don't understand it. Like the people who are fascist who think that they're in the rebellion in Star Wars. It's
Mhm.
like, what do you mean? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on?
Well,
What's happening? but like that stuff happens sometimes. But it's still like most of the time people pick up what they're putting down and you don't need like I guess the best example for Star Wars stuff for me like that is Like, the prequel movies are god awful, but I still love Hayden Christensen.
Mhm.
Um, he's one I this is such a weird story. It's just funny how this happened. But when I was a teenager, when I was like 16, um, Fox Family was like the channel at the time that it was called. I don't even know what it's called anymore. But there was this show called Higher Ground on it, and it was a show about honestly, it was a show about the troubled teen industry, but it was like shown in like a good way, like a good facility like that.
Mhm.
And of course, I ended up watching it. My mom and I used to watch it, which is so funny. Like one of his character, Hayden Christensen, was on the show before he was ever Darth Vader, and his character was an incest victim. He was being sexually abused by his stepmom,
Yeah.
and that was like the big twist about his character. And I was like, and at the time, I was like, oh, okay. And like, I literally fell off the couch when I was watching Entertainment Tonight, and they said that he was going to be Darth Vader because I already knew him. And I
Mhm.
was like, what do you mean the guy who's playing the nice incest victim on my Fox Family show is gonna be Darth Vader? Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
But so like when I think about like the prequel trilogies, I George Lucas is a just a terrible writer when there's nobody there to like fix his
Rein him in.
scripts.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, I can say that George Lucas is bad at writing when you just like leave him alone and there's no one to rein him in.
Mhm.
I still love Star Wars though, and I still love Hayden Christensen and will defend him forever. And the actor who played Jar Jar Binks too, and Jake Lloyd, who all got horrible harassment during those
Yeah.
years, even though the movies themselves are not good movies. And so it's not like a thing of like I'm not ashamed to say that I love Star Wars or that I still watch the prequel trilogy sometimes, even though they're not good movies. And George Lucas does have some borderline racist jokes in those movies with how the aliens talk and things like that and there's a literal like like slave and nobody cares like there's not like nobody goes back to save Anakin's mom that like very much
I
confused
mean,
me like
Anakin goes back, but he goes back a little too late.
yeah and like well it's just like this not even like a storyline that comes up like you would think that when they go back that all of the like Jedi would be like oh we have to go back to this planet to like liberate all the people on this planet they're all being like stuck here as slaves. And but it never even comes up as something that anyone even considers. And it's just like and that's like one of those things that you're supposed to notice that to show like how messed up they are. That never occurs to any of them, even
Yeah,
like
that
the
like slavery is
rebellious ones.
somehow allowed in the Federation of Plan or whatever it's called, whatever the Star
Mhm.
Wars equivalent is.
Yeah. And like, 14-year-old me was watching The Phantom Menace and it literally I'm not exact this is one of those stories I think is funny just to tell because of me being old and just it's just funny that I did not realize until I was like 23 that the general like theory about Anakin was that he didn't have a dad and that he was born like magically through the force because I grew up being raped. So when she said I don't have a dad, I was like, "Oh, she was raped by somebody." And
Um,
she just like got away from that guy. And that's why she's saying that and looking really weird at like Qui-Gon is because she's hiding from somebody that was abusing her. And I literally never once until I was like 23 and went on like a message board forum somewhere did I ever find out that for years by that point people were mad at George Lucas because they thought he made him like immaculate conception. I was like,
that's the
wasn't
implication, or that's what I took the implication to mean.
I was like, wasn't she just raped? Like, isn't that what like
I
isn't
mean,
that what
people say
happened?
that about Mary too, so you might not be far off.
Yeah, it's just I that's one of those things that is so funny about when you go through shit like that you think so differently about things and you don't even realize that you're thinking differently than literally everyone else you've ever met.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when a couple months ago, I was talking to my therapist and I told her that story, and she was like, "My goal is for you not to think about that one day, for like you to like watch a storyline like that and not just immediately be like, oh, they were just raped." And I was like, "That sounds like a really fun goal to have." I don't know if
Yeah.
it's possible, but that sounds fun.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah, but that's I just wanted to talk about that because you're just making it so hard on yourself to enjoy anything.
Mhm.
And we talk about that stuff. We've talked about that with like the Percy Jackson cast that like the teenage fans will go wild. Oh, that reminds me that I wanted to mention that one. There's a girl that made a really good video on TikTok who that thankfully has gotten like a bunch of views that where she was talking about how people are saying that like teenagers are like sexualizing Walker and things like that by making videos about him. No, 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 no. The teenagers are not the ones that are sexualizing him. They're children and they're having an age appropriate crush. You know
Mhm.
how rare it is for people who are teenage girls, especially, to have crushes on boys that are their age. Like, most of the time, it's like 39-year-old Tom Hiddleston or
Yeah.
somebody who's, like, way older than them that is, like, prepping them for being groomed one day. Not like Walker or the rest of the cast that are all, like, their age or only, like, a year or 2 older than them. And so this person made a great video pointing out, like, let teenagers be teenagers. Let them have crushes on people that are actually age appro I was like, "Please, please, please, somebody let them have crushes on people that are age appropriate. This is, like, a very healthy thing." They're not like, teenagers are not the ones being inappropriate with anyone in the cast. It's, like, people that are older than, like, 20 that
Mhm.
are being inappropriate in that way. But, like, can we not be, like, mean to, like, literal teenage girls that are just making silly videos? Because that's literally just part
Yeah.
of being alive when you're a teenager is making,
Yeah.
like, cringy videos about
Well,
something.
and the equivalent for our generation was, like, clipping out from those stupid teenager magazines, like, clipping out every single picture of your crush. Like, that's what girls in our generation did when we had a crush on somebody.
Mhm.
And so, like, the technology is just better these days. I mean, what can I
Yeah.
say?
Yeah, like, I I thank God every day that when I was a teenager was before social media was around,
Yeah.
that all me and my friends had were, like, Angel Fire websites, which we all had.
Yeah.
I'm so glad there was nothing else because there would be the stupidest videos out there. It's part of just being a teenager. You're supposed to do shit like that. It's part of the fun and part of being that age. And it's that whole, thing that people are, like, constantly, like, almost like it's like this weird, like, level of, like, surveillance where people are always surveilling each other and, like, checking them for things and, like, questioning things that they're doing, and it just makes it really hard where, like, nothing that you do can ever be good enough if people are always trying to find something wrong with something that you've done or said or whatever. Um like, that was something that was really hard for me the last couple weeks was no matter what I said or did, people just misconstrued everything that I said because they wanted me to be a bad person, or they
Mhm.
thought that I was a bad person, and so even if I was being very nice, it didn't matter because they just
Definitely.
read bad things in everything I did, and it's like a teenager making videos about Walker using, like, silly, like, CapCut edits is the most, like, wholesome thing
Mhm.
on the internet. Like, I see those edits and I like them because they are adorable. Those children are adorable,
Mhm.
absolutely adorable. I would adopt them if they needed me to because 'cause they're so cute. And I don't even read the comments because they're so cute and they're obviously not for me. And I just love the fact that they're there because it's just so cute to see them doing that stuff.
Yeah.
Um, it's not for me at all, and so it's just adorable to see them doing that. I never read the comments to find out that they're, like, yelling at each other sometimes about what they're making. It's like, "No,
Oh
that's
my
a
yeah.
totally normal thing to do. Can we just, like, let them be people?
Mhm.
Like, it's gonna be fine." Like, they're not the ones that are the problems. The ones that
Exactly.
were making, like, countdown clocks to when he turns 18, those
Yeah.
are the
That
bitches
yeah.
that should be looking for me because I will find you one day and, like, scream at you for at least a half hour. Like, those were, like, grown adults, like, people, like, around in, like, their 30s that were doing really freaky things like that.
Oh my god.
Teenage people
Preach.
his own age thinking that he's cute is the most wholesome shit you will probably ever find on the internet.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, so speaking of which, so Percy Jackson cast news. I know it's just Walker's birthday, Capricorn King, and he turned 16.
Mhm.
I know there's so people feel a lot of ways about the puberty jump, and I know we're probably going to hear more discussion of that once like a bigger trailer drops, or maybe even once the whole season drops. Maybe both, you know.
Mhm.
But it's so interesting because we grew up in an era where people were like in their late 20s playing teenagers. Like
Yeah.
Keiko Aijena, who plays, I think that's how you say her name,
Mhm.
Lane Kim in Gilmore Girls, was I think in her 30s playing like a 16-year-old. And
Yeah, I remember
yeah,
being shocked when I found out how old she was.
yeah.
Or like, what's his name? Chad Michael Murray was like 29 or something like that during like season 1 of One Tree Hill, which was he was supposed to be playing like a 16-year-old, and that was just like normal then. It was like a joke
Mhm.
about like there's so many skits from back then of like 35-year-old men like walking around pretending to be like that, the movie Never Been Kissed. Like the idea that Drew Barrymore could go back to high school and pass for a 16-year-old when she was like 35. Like that's ridiculous, but that was the kind of stuff that people did then. So it's beyond strange to see people being like Walker is too old because he's 16 and Percy is supposed to be like about to be turning 14 in after Sea of Monsters is over. And I'm like, can we chill? Like he's only 2 years older than what his character is supposed to be. Like that's so accurate. It's kind of ridiculous how
Mhm.
accurate that is. Um even like it's even like Charlie like playing Luke. Luke is like he is the age that Luke is.
Yeah.
Like he is 20 and Luke is 20 in Sea of Monsters. And like I will say that people have noticed lately a lot of like little comments that a lot of people involved with like the cast and stuff with all of their birthday posts. They're all talking about as if they're going to be doing future seasons, as if they're not afraid of it not happening. And they were more afraid of it not happening after season 1. Like after season 1, it was like, I hope that we get another season. But
Yeah.
this time they're like looking forward to filming more seasons with you. I can't wait to go back on set and film more stuff with you, things like that. And so I think that it's like a rational thing to say that they're likely knowing that they're going to be working on this for a while.
Mhm.
They just got 16 Emmy nominations.
Yeah.
There's no way that Disney's like, we're going to take our time with this show. Like, no, they're not going to, especially when everyone involved in it wants to keep going and
Mhm.
is really excited about keeping going. Um, the thing with not only him, but like the entire cast, really, because they're all like pretty young, except for Daniel, obviously.
Mhm.
The rest of them are all pretty young. Is that like, well, especially for Walker, he has this weird complex sometimes in interviews about being too old.
Mhm.
Like when he got the part, he was worried that he was too old because he was 13 instead of 12.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, and every once in a while he says something like that's why I hated when people are all talking about it with Ryan Reynolds being a little bitch to him, was because he would kept mentioning more in interviews like it's not going to be accurate to season 1. I'm going to look really different from season 1 to season 2, and I'm like you're supposed to because that's what boys do
Yeah.
when they're from 12 to 13. Um but it's like, I already know this child thinks about this way too much because he brings it up in a lot of interviews, and I'm like, "I know that you're a Capricorn, but I need you to calm down
Yeah.
and stop being such a perfectionist that even though everyone says that you're, like, the best person to play Percy Jackson, that you think that you're not good enough just because of your literal age." Like
Yeah.
and so whenever I see people start talking about that, I'm like, "Quiet, he's gonna hear you." And then he's gonna think about it some more and mention it in a bunch of other interviews. Shh.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah, it's just like it's a factor of the age. William literally went to spend like 3 nights with his grandparents. It came back and it was like, "Are you a different kid? You're big. Who
Uh-huh.
are you?" Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you go to school, you go home for like Christmas break or like summer break, and you come back the next year and they like sound like grizzly men and you're like, when the hell did this happen?
Yeah.
Like where you go from like I used to be one of the tallest kids in my class and now I'm one of the shortest because all the boys are like 6 inches taller than me. Um, that's just how it is for them. And so I hope that people don't go too hard on that stuff without it being just like being excited about watching them grow up because that is like really fun
Mhm,
to watch these kids as actors like grow up. It's going to be fun to watch them improve as the years go on and just get more comfortable with their characters and stuff. That's the fun of a show like this, especially literally watching them like literally growing up because
mhm.
of how young they are. But I do think that it's absolutely wild that there are people out there who think that Walker is too old to play Percy when he is a sophomore in high school. He's
Yeah.
a sophomore in high school, and people think that he's too old.
Okay.
When, what do you mean?
Yeah. Let's
Oh, the thing I didn't want to forget about that you're not going to understand any of this, but that's fine. You can
yes.
understand enough of it. Is so the Reed Riordan blog that is kind of in my mind because I know digital marketing stuff. I'm like, oh, this is Rick's SEO blog. Because that's basically what it is other people writing blogs to like promote his stuff. Like he doesn't it's not his blog where he writes his own stuff. It's other people just like promoting things. So on New Year's Eve or New Year's Day, one of those days, they put out a blog of like different characters um saying what their new year resolution was going to be.
Mhm,
um so our like both of our mutuals, like Sky on TikTok, she posted this video and I was like, oh, this is weirdly timed. That she posted a video where she was talking about the sequel book for Nico and Will that's supposed to come out, I think,
mhm,
sometime this year. Um, the people were talking about that because they were worried that that something will happen to Will or something like that because it's a sequel book. They're just worried that something will happen to him because there's another book.
mhm,
And she was saying how, I don't think that's going to happen. And I was like, oh, I literally just read something that actually fits in line with this idea.
mhm.
That Reed Riordan blog, one of the New Year's resolution things was Nico saying that he wants this year to be like relaxing and have nothing going wrong. And I'm like, you're in a Rick Riordan book.
Yep.
Like, that's not going to be true. But it's like cute to see him want to like get to that point where he has like a more relaxing year. Um, but the main thing was Hazel's like New Year's resolution thing. Hazel is a character from the Heroes of Olympus books. She's Nico's sister, um, the on the Roman side, but
Mhm,
still, it's his sister. And she was talking about how she's going to change things at Camp Jupiter, which is the Roman camp in like San Francisco,
mhm.
and that people might be upset about it, but she doesn't care. She's going to try to change things. And she was basically like, everyone give us time and don't throw it in my face if it like doesn't work, is like how the thing ends. And Frank is her boyfriend. And he basically said that he was worried about Hazel's plans for Camp Jupiter next year, but
Oh,
that he
yeah.
hoped that it would turn out better than he thought it would be. And so I don't know what that means. Like it could mean literally anything at all. About how they could change Camp Jupiter. Me just being me, I Camp Jupiter is like it's very interesting to compare Camp Half Blood and Camp Jupiter because people on like the Roman side tend to live longer. Like the demigods on that side don't worry as much about dying young the way that they do on the Greek side.
Mhm.
But they also are like extremely unemotional, not attached to any feelings, don't really have real companionship at all.
Yeah.
Like and Rick always does he does such a good job of showing that in the books that when like Jason is someone on the Roman side, when he goes missing, there's people in the camp that want to go after him, but they're basically like, no, you can't go after him because we have duty and justice and things we have to do. And so they're not allowed to like just go after him.
Mhm.
Um, and on like the Greek side, somebody would be murdered in the street if they
A lot of
tried to
passion. Yeah.
stop Annabeth, Clarice, literally anyone at all who's still at that camp from looking for Percy. Literally, they drop everything to look for him. And so it's like it's this weird dichotomy where Camp Jupiter, they live longer, they have like a university and like a whole city. That's why Percy is trying to go to college there in like the latest books, because it gives them a chance to like have a place to like actually live and have real lives and things like that. But they also are like so disconnected from like their emotions, and they are told to be these unemotional like soldiers, where they're supposed to do everything for like duty, where like when Percy is like suicidal and literally tells Jason that he's suicidal, and one of the last Heroes of Olympus books, he generally doesn't realize what he's saying,
Mhm.
because he's so like he sees Percy as somebody who is just like a leader and could never possibly be upset about anything that he's going through, because they're not supposed to talk about any of that stuff.
Pragmatism. Oh my gosh, like it's like a stereotype, of course, because Rick's writing for middle schoolers. So of
Mhm.
course it's on
Mhm.
the nose, but it's a stereotype of Roman pragmatism.
Yeah. And it's exactly that. And so it makes me wonder if Hazel is going to try to like stop that, because it is really, 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 really unhealthy to be doing that. Like, and it is like a hard thing during those books, whenever they're around, that they're just so disconnected from feelings, and you just like want to shake them and let them feel things. Like Hazel is honestly one of the best things about those later books is that Hazel and Frank are the ones that go on like the quest with Percy when he doesn't remember who he is, and he's very vulnerable. He has no idea what he's doing. They're like eating food out of dumpsters, like eating garbage because they don't have any food, and he doesn't even have any clue who he is at all. And they think that he's a god because of how powerful he is and things like that, and is very different because he's Greek. And
Mhm.
so like when they're at like Camp Jupiter and they do like their version of like capture the flag, I forget what it's called. But like people literally get like skewered, like stabbed in like the stomach when they do it. And it's very like intense in that way. And he goes through and just and like literally like bowls everybody down, because he does it the Greek way, where he has all this passion. And
Mhm.
they don't have any passion. They're all about like, this is the plan.
Yeah.
This is the plan that we're doing, and we can't defer from the plan. And
Mhm.
so nobody think it's like literally it's that sort of a thing. And so I could be totally wrong about that, because they could do something completely different. But I'm like, okay, so I feel like the storyline from the Will and Nico book is going to be involving Hazel, which is really fun to see Hazel again. Hazel and Frank. I love Hazel and Frank. They're so sweet.
Mhm.
And I think that's part of them that's interesting, is that they're a more emotional ones, but they don't fit in. Like Frank's Frank's dad is like the Roman version of Ares,
Mhm.
who is like not like the Greek version of Ares. Like when Percy meets the Roman version of Ares, he tries to fight him, and he's like, "Why are you trying to fight me?" And he just hates him, because he just hates Aries by default, which yeah, you should. And but like he doesn't understand, that version of Aries is not like that. So
Mhm.
he's like very confused by this literal child trying to fight him out in the street at Camp Jupiter, who doesn't even remember who he is. And Frank is like, "Why are you trying to fight my like he's Frank is a very empathetic, caring, kind little soul." And so him being like an Aries, Mars person, it just doesn't fit when you know like the Greek world,
Mhm.
but it's like fun about how they can do that on the Roman side and show kind of those different personality types, that him and Hazel are very kind, caring people.
Mhm.
Um and they're very sweet with Percy when he doesn't remember anything. They're very protective of him later on. and like get mad at they don't ever like Leo because Leo doesn't like Percy. There's other reasons why they don't like Leo too, but they especially don't like Leo for how he talks about Percy. They're like back off. Um and so it's just like interesting that Hazel and Frank end up being in this position of power now at Camp Jupiter because they went on the big scary quest and survived.
Mhm.
Um and so that means that they can do well to end this whole thing, I guess the thing I always like when I go on like my soliloquies about Rick Riordan, how he wrote this series about intergenerational trauma and how this actually happens and things like that. Um, this like Percy used his power to like do little changes to try to change things for the better
Mhm.
and the position of power that he had in like the Greek world. And so Hazel and Frank now being like the top people on the Roman side and using that position of power to try to change things for the better, even if it shakes everything up for a while. That's exactly how that actually works in real life. Like when you do that intergenerational trauma stuff, that's what happens. You just kind of do things
Mhm.
and you don't really know what you're doing. You're just kind of doing them. and and then eventually people around you see you doing it, and especially if they notice that you don't hate yourself every second of your life anymore,
Mhm.
they're more likely to like try doing little things that are like challenging for them. But they're more willing to try because they saw you do it. And that's like the whole point of Percy doing that and why it's such a good story is that he doesn't do this over dramatic like power move like a lot of series like this do. He does something small, but like it like inspires all the other kids around him to do other things like that. And
Mhm.
that is what is actually going to make like long-term change in this world because it can't all be one person. It
Yeah.
has to be a lot of other people involved, and all the other kids that he's known have all started doing things like that to try to fix things for the other kids around them because they saw him do it and they know that they can. And so it'd be really fun to see a story like that. um I don't even think they've said when that book is coming out yet, except that it is coming out this year because
Mhm.
they've said they're already done editing it.
Yeah.
So that should be announced soon. But that was really fun to read that and be like, is anyone talking about this? Because that was when I was private, so I couldn't
Yeah.
post about it. And I was like, is anyone noticing this thing that's in this random like SEO blog that people probably ignore most of the time?
Yeah, because this is very clearly a hint at what a next plot line is going to be.
Hmm. And like, as soon as it was New Year's Day, all of a sudden the like main Instagram account like made their own like channel and started posting things. And um the one thing from the show that I will say is that they're in like the last couple weeks of filming,
Mhm.
and I'm honestly curious if there's anybody but Walker there because the last couple weeks of filming for season 1 was when he did all of the underwater scenes
Oh,
that were like challenging, and I always think it is so funny. And I think this is a smart decision, but I also think that it's very funny that they all waited to film those scenes at the very end because they're like, I don't want to kill this child. So what if we film all the scenes where he has to do an entire scene underwater, the absolute last days that we can do it, so that we can like work ourselves up to this anxiety-inducing moment. And I
yeah.
always think it's funny that Walker's like, I wish that we would have done it sooner because I felt like I connected with my character better. And I'm like, it's because they were worried that they were going to kill you.
Mhm.
Like that's why they did it last.
Yeah.
And so now I'm like, I wonder if there's anyone else that they're worried they're gonna possibly hurt this time, or if it's just him again.
I mean, Leah would have an underwater scene with the sirens probably,
Hmm.
so she's
And
the
it, and
thing.
Daniel would because he gets blown up
Oh, yeah.
underwater. And if they do the scenes at the end of Sea of Monsters where he goes to Poseidon's like palace,
Mhm.
if they do anything like that, there would probably be some scenes of him underwater too. Um, so I'm sure that's what the last couple weeks are because a lot of like their cast and crew, like their cinematographer they usually have isn't there. They're
Mhm.
using like a different person for the last couple weeks. So I'm sure it's like stuff like that that they're done. They're basically done. I
Yeah.
guess is what I'm trying to say. And so they'll give us something sometime soon. Um, you should, if you're curious about when, you should probably Google when the next Disney shareholders phone call is, because they usually drop news like that during their shareholders meetings.
Mhm,
Um, and Percy Jackson makes them look really good, so they'll talk about it then, and that's like during those shareholder calls is when they'll drop like, oh, season 2 is coming out this day, or this was renewed, or that was renewed. They'll just all of a sudden you'll see like a tweet of like a billion things that was just like renewed or something
mhm,
on Disney. And they always do that during their shareholder calls because those are the people that give them all their money.
mhm,
Um, and that's when they're like showing off about how good everything was doing. Like last year, when they did the shareholder calls after the season was over, was when they were saying that like the first episode got 35 million views by the time the season was over, which is just absolutely insane.
yeah,
But that, and I'm honestly curious how much it has now, like a year later. But they were giving like stats like that every episode of their show got at least 10 million views for the entire season at that point. And so this year it will be giving us like dates about when things will be happening
mhm,
and things like that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it happens during one of those calls because that's just what Disney does.
yeah. Um, so I think that's it for cast news for now. I don't remember anything else coming out besides like
No.
mostly stuff around Walker's birthday this past
Yeah.
week. Yeah,
If you want to see clips of Walker singing,
yeah.
go ahead because for some reason everyone posted pictures like videos of him singing. Um, go ahead and look at that. There's one picture that Leah posted of him on set, like wearing like the Camp Half Blood shirt, like in water,
Mhm,
like looking like he was just coming up from doing an underwater scene. So if you want to like get excited about thinking about seeing more things like that of
mhm.
him being Percy, go ahead and look at that and stare at it for a while until until you can like imagine what a full trailer will look like.
Yeah, and if you're watching this late, because I know a lot of that stuff was on stories, usually like the fan sites will repost. So updates on Walker's one that I know posts a lot. There's like Percy series or something, or is that the official one? I can't. Okay,
Yeah,
there's some. Yeah,
Percy series is the official one. There's like
yeah.
Percy Film or Percy Films. That's the other one like that I follow. And I know that there's kids making TikTok videos with like all of the different
Yeah.
photos and stuff because it was like 20 minutes after those were posted, they all had like posted the individual photos and I was like, I'm not even going to try to look at what these photos are. I'm just going to wait for like a child to figure this out and just post it for me and see if there's anything there like for the show.
Yeah.
Either way, those pictures are fun if you're like an adult like us, getting to see the kids just be kids.
Yeah.
It's always nice to see them be able to still be kids.
Exactly.
Um, that's all I care about when I see that stuff.
Yeah. So since we kind of got derailed with Epic, we didn't know what we were gonna fill the rest of our time with. And then we by chance both decided to start Song of Achilles. So like it was like, okay, might as well. But there's a few things that I want to talk about before we kind of get into our opinions of the first few chapters. On my end, and this was a criticism that we got because of the stuff with Epic, was that we seem to flip flop on whether or not we need things to be true to the original story or not. Now, I know if you had the memory space on what you edit with, you could put in a whole compilation of times of me saying, yes, this is not how it happens in the original story. I understand why he made this choice. Because I
Mhm,
said that multiple times, like multiple
mhm,
episodes.
mhm,
I know I said it. So that has never been the problem. And before we dive into another adaptation of mythology, I feel like I need to say that. And people, of course, were critiquing you about saying your favorite adaptation of the Medusa story is the one from Percy Jackson, specifically the TV series. And people were like, that's not Greek mythology. We have never set out to be a strictly Greek mythology platform. That
mhm,
has never been the goal. We started with Percy Jackson, but in our minds, we blend all mythology together, and I'm talking no matter like what date, it could be to present. And we will we will make distinctions. We will say, like, I know this is the version that this comes from, and I like this version because of this. But we're not so pedantic that we're like, only one version can be a headcanon for somebody. And
Mhm.
so yeah, it did seem like we flip flopped because the arguments got so turned around in that whole epic saga that
Mhm.
like when people were challenging you for not having expected hold them down, and we were talking about the real events of the Odyssey and that's why we didn't expect it, then it turned into, oh, so you don't like epic because it's not the real Odyssey. That's not what we were trying to say. Like,
No.
and
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 it
there
was
there's characterizations we liked better in the Odyssey, we will say that.
yeah. It was just that was so funny because we spent this entire year defending the Percy Jackson adaptation for
Mhm,
changing things and adapting things and things like that. And so I was like, what do you mean that you now think that I'm someone that wants it to be exact to like the original story?
mhm,
Like that's not either one of us.
mhm,
The reason why I don't like how people talk about Medusa or Persephone for that matter is that they talk about it as if there's like one answer. And
mhm,
that's like the thing that I don't like is all of the one of the things that was very weird about the epic stuff to notice is that somebody would make a video and everyone would just regurgitate
mhm,
what that person said in that video. Like that one person that made 4 videos about me, one of them just laughing about Medusa stuff. She was the one who said, like, "Oh, Medusa is Roman mythology, not Greek mythology." And Medusa was never like a rape survivor. And Ovid made that up because he was wanting people to like question the gods. And I was like, every time I got that comment, I was like, I don't know why you guys think that I would think that it was a bad thing to question people in authority and power that have total domination over your life. Like, he should be questioning the gods. Why aren't you questioning the gods? This is
he
very weird.
supposedly wrote that while in exile, so if
Yeah.
get people to question authority, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah. And it's also like I made a video like this, but I genuinely don't know why you like Greek mythology if you don't want to use it as a way to talk about how the gods are abusive monsters because they are. Like
Mhm,
literally every story is them terrorizing humans and just putting them through all this stuff and not even caring that they are or not even realizing what they're doing. They
mhm,
just do it because they feel like it. And I was like, who else are they but abusive people in whatever society we're
mhm,
in at the time? That's that's who they always are. And
yeah,
so I don't know why you would be upset about that, but it's also the way that they were saying it was like they were fact checking us. Like,
mhm,
"Oh, Medusa isn't Greek mythology, she's actually Roman mythology. I just wanna let you know that so that you stop believing in this, like, rape victim who's never actually a rape victim," which is always when I have, like, the intense desire to be like, "Do you know that she was not real?"
yeah,
Like, because you're talking about her as if she is real. You're talking about her and, like, Persephone and stuff as if they were real people, and you are fact checking disinformation or misinformation about their lives. They
mhm,
are not real. They are myths, they are stories. If somebody wants to make a story about Medusa that says that she was raped by Poseidon, which is way more accurate of like an like Medusa as like who she is in the stories would never be able to tell a god no.
mhm,
Like never. You would never be able to tell to the idea that she would be on equal playing field with Poseidon and Athena is a fucking joke.
mhm,
And so, obviously, hello, people know about power imbalances and things like that now. And
mhm,
so it doesn't take very much to be like, yeah, that does make sense. Or for Persephone to think that like maybe she wanted to get away from her mom because her mom,
yeah,
created an entire new season just because she was gone. And even though her mom loves her daughter and has a lot of love for her, that doesn't mean that your daughter doesn't want to like go and have a chance to live her own life and be her own person and figure out who she is without her mom there kind of telling her how she should be or what she should do. That's
mhm,
literally every person when you get to be like 18, you want to go out on your even people who have good parents want to get out of the house and live their own life and figure out who they are for themselves without their parents there to bail them out. And because that's you want to like finally take everything that you've learned the first 18 years of your life and like
Yeah.
apply it and see what you think and how you feel. And that's all that story can be. It doesn't have to be more than that. But the way that people talk about it is if they act like they're fact checking a real person.
Yeah.
And that's when I'm like, I don't understand this desire besides the idea that you just want to be right. Like you want to be able to say, I'm right about this and you're wrong.
Mhm.
Like there's an author on TikTok this week that was making videos saying this person is wrong about Greek mythology and was saying like, oh, women weren't being mistreated during Greek times, and I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? Are you on drugs? Like, to actually believe that women are mistreated now? You really think that things that are happening now weren't happening back then? That is just part of society and men being in power and people being in power and mistreating that power. People will always want to do that, and you like, but it's also like an idea. It's like actually completely insane for classic type people to be like, I dedicated my life to learning about this like 3,000 to 4,000 year part of history. And I'm also going to tell you that every single person of this entire world for 4,000 years felt the exact same.
Mhm.
And that, and even though our society feels extremely differently about things from 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Like things have changed so much, but they expect that to tell me that like, oh, from a 4,000-year span, everyone felt the same. And it's like, what do you mean? No, they didn't. Like,
Yeah.
why would you say that? Like, of course
Well,
they didn't.
and I will say, I will never ever claim to be a history and culture expert. When I studied Greek and Latin, I studied literature. I studied the literature. And for me, like, yes, sometimes the teachers would really like do a great job at setting up the framework of history around that. But most of the time, it wasn't about that. Like, my education was not about that, and it was never like if I were to bring up Ovid's version of Medusa in a Greek mythology context in college, no one would have been like, "That's wrong." Like, "That's wrong. You can't talk about that because in this class, she is only a Gorgon and has only ever been a Gorgon." And yeah, like,
Yeah.
it's never been like that. So, when we us two in the context of this podcast and also in a lot of our own content are talking about mythology. We're talking about it in a comparative way that does look at multiple versions, including modern versions.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah.
I feel like I made a video that made people mad, but it was worth it because it was really fun.
Mhm.
Of showing how people that were Epic fans were talking about Medusa versus Walker Scobell, who is a literal child,
Mhm.
and says like, "Oh yeah, there's two versions of her myth. The Gorgon one is cool, but I like the new one better."
Yep.
And I was like, "Why is this so hard for adults to like conceptualize in their brain? Like, he's in 8th grade when he said that." And you don't understand that, and you're the only reason part of that whole thing is the only reason they were being so hard about that with me is because they didn't like me.
Yeah.
And that one girl said that, so that all of a sudden they all became experts on Medusa and Roman mythology because they just wanted to use that against me, which like I genuinely don't know what you're doing when I'm saying I don't like how rape is depicted, and your response to that is to tell me that to try to take away a story that is about rape survivors being comforted. Maybe think about the things that you're doing before they come out of your mouth.
Yeah.
Like, just saying, if you want to look like horrible people, that's making you look like horrible people. It's really easy for me to make you look like horrible people when you're bullying me for liking somebody who made me feel like I could leave the house without being attacked at any given moment. Um, Maybe just stop talking for 10 seconds and think about what you're about to say because those things will forever live on the internet and will never go away.
Mhm.
Just gonna say that.
Yeah.
Like some of you are young, but that stuff is always gonna be there and you're gonna have to deal with that one day and actually think about how you talk to me and other people too.
Mhm.
But the whole point of that is like when people start getting very pedantic about this shit, I literally feel like the fun of mythology being like sucked out of everything.
Mhm.
Like it's like you're taking this thing that is supposed to be really fun and making it
Not
boring
yeah.
and stupid and just like a really stuffy argument of like stop. Like we talk about adaptations because we like it's about like the story, the
Mhm,
points that they're making, the thing like the narrative that they're telling, the themes in like culture and society and things like that that they're hitting on by talking about the things that they're talking about. That is what is makes this stuff interesting. That's what makes people feel connected to it
mhm.
is the emotion of it all. To be like, I studied Roman mythology, so you're not allowed to like Medusa. It's like I like her because she makes me feel safe.
Yeah.
Like, what do you mean? I don't care why Ovid like wrote this stuff. I could not give a singular fuck why he did because that has nothing to do with why I like it.
Mhm.
And like that's why, Rick Riordan and Becky for that matter and the rest of the show um doing such a good job with that character is so great is because they also understand
Mhm.
that they're not being like that. They're going with like the emotion of the story because that's what actually matters.
Yeah.
And so to like that's why we didn't like certain things in Epic, not because it was an adaptation, but
Mm.
because the way that it was adapted changed a character that I really liked for one reason into a villain. I
Yes.
I didn't want to watch Odysseus turn into a monster because he loved his wife. I didn't want to watch that. And it's fine if you did, but I didn't want to watch that. I like Odysseus. I like that he's a hero. I didn't want to watch him be a horrible monster and then be rewarded for being a monster by reuniting with his family again at the end like everything was fine. I didn't want to see that.
Mhm.
And so it's okay if you do, but that's why I didn't like it because I didn't like watching a character I always liked as a hero that reminded me of myself being like turning into the abusers that were attacking him.
Yeah.
Instead of it being about him like overcoming abusers trying to attack him, it was him turning into that person and not even fully grasping the concept that he was. Um Seemingly by the end because his wife like lets him get away with it all.
Mhm.
Um and so I didn't like that. That's why I didn't like it. It has nothing to do with the story changing. Um like I talk all the time about how I think the way that they've changed season 1 of Percy Jackson made it way better.
Yeah.
Like the scene at the end where Annabeth is there when the Luke reveal happens is so much better that it's honestly shocking to me that that wasn't the original scene because it fits the character so well.
Mhm.
I'm not somebody that needs it to be exact. I just want the themes of the story to be something that I enjoy. That's all it is.
Yeah.
And it's not that we like flip flop. It's just like different stories make you feel different things.
Mhm.
That's that's
Yeah, that's
that's
it.
how it should be. Like you
Yeah.
shouldn't just like if I'm watching something and I only like it because it's like accurate to the original myths, then like I don't actually like it because it doesn't matter like what the storyline is or the acting or the writing or anything really involved. I only like it for this very unemotional reason, and that's just never going to be how I feel about media ever.
Mhm. Yeah. So, and I know we did want to talk a bit about trigger warnings and how we're going to handle them moving forward because Epic was a surprise to us. We are going to be very careful about what suggestions we take on what to read or watch moving forward. And when I say that, I mean specifically, we are going to look up trigger warnings ourselves. And if there's any that could potentially be problematic, probably ask a friend that we know enjoys it, whether or not they think we can handle it. And this is more so for you than for me, but like I feel like I have, the expected amount of reaction to things like that. Like of course it's still painful to read and it's not fun and enjoyable to read certain topics, but there are specific trigger warnings that for you are really really hard.
Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah. Like a lot of things trigger me.
mhm,
That's like part of the thing that is hard about when you have like severe trauma for a long
Mhm,
time is a lot of things trigger you in some way because so many things remind you of it.
mhm,
Um, and so, like, Percy Jackson triggers me. Like, I always read when we were reading their books, or yeah, I always read the chapters like 2 days before we actually did this, so that I would be able to like calm down enough by the time we did it, where I would like make sense
mhm.
like talking instead of just like having feelings everywhere.
Yeah.
Because I knew that I had to do that. That's just what I have to do. It
Mhm,
doesn't mean that I don't love those books and don't enjoy reading them, because I really do, but it's just part of the whole process. And so we looked up the trigger warnings for the Song of Achilles. There's a lot of them, obviously, for any book like this. Um, if you've read it before and have more specific information about where certain triggers happen, or like when, or like how long, or how often, that
mhm,
would be helpful, because I will say, like, A Little Life is a book that I absolutely hate. Like,
mhm,
I hate that book so much. Honestly, any incest survivor has like undying hatred for that book most of the time, because of how mostly because of how the author talks about people like us. Like,
mhm.
the basically, if you don't know anything about that book, the author openly says that she thinks that therapy is a waste of time,
Oof.
and that some people just live a difficult enough life where the only thing they can do is unalive themselves. And
Mhm,
so she wrote a book where a character goes through so much horrible trauma over and over and over and over again, and describes it in like I guess a lot of detail, because it's like an 800-page book,
mhm.
to convince you that by the time you get to the end of the book and he does unalive himself, that it's like the only thing that he should do, and that it's actually a good thing that he does that. I don't think I have to explain why I hate that.
Mhm.
Obviously, I hate that. Like, I think that I deserve to live,
Yeah.
and I think that my life is much better because I didn't do that. I'm really grateful that I didn't, because I have a chance to like have a happy life, instead of it just being a horrible, tragic disaster. If I
Mhm.
would have taken myself out at any point before this time in my life, and so that book, for example, if you look up the trigger warnings, it's crazy. And like, because that book is so crazy, some people have started like listing like how often they
Mhm.
show up and things like that, because they happen so much in that book.
Yeah.
Um but most of the time when they list trigger warnings, they just say that it's in it, and it doesn't really say like how often they happen. And
Yeah.
so I know Song of Achilles is a really popular book. I have seen people on Book Talk crying over it for like 4 years now. Um,
Mhm.
so I know that a lot of people have read it. So if you're somebody who's read it, I don't care about spoilers necessarily in that way.
Mhm.
If you've read it, leave a comment, or if you see this when TikTok is still around, um, you can message one of us there and just tell us, like, if you've read it before, how often does this stuff actually come up?
Yeah.
Is it a lot, or is it, like, really graphic? Just so I like, the whole thing with Epic, that why it was so hard is because I didn't know, and
Mhm.
I was, like, very much caught off guard and surprised, and that's for anyone who has never had triggers like that and doesn't know what it's like to, like, actually be triggered, as opposed to, like, how the internet describes being triggered. um, like, the being triggered is always the worst when you don't expect it and it surprises you. That's
Mhm.
always when it's really bad. Like, I wish that people understood like how bad that actually is when you really are going through that, because they wouldn't tell you to just like handle it and be so
Mhm.
dismissive if they knew what it was really like. Like,
Yeah.
the best way I know how to describe it is like when I watched that video of Jorge singing "Hold Them Down," knowing that he wanted to name the song "Hold Her Down," and then heard the words that he was saying, I literally, like, had body sensations,
Mhm.
like it was happening to me again, and that hasn't happened to me in a long
Yeah.
time, like, in, like, 20 years, it hasn't. The person who did it to me has been dead for 10 years, and he didn't do it the last 10 years that I was alive, and so, or he was alive, sorry. So, like, that's, like, what happens to you when you're surprised by something like that, and it, like, triggers those sort of memories.
Mhm.
And so it's always better to know, and so you're not I don't care. I don't care about spoiler kind of stuff, but just like tell me how often it happens. It doesn't mean that I can't read it or enjoy it,
Mhm.
like people were saying. It just means that if I know that it's coming, then I can do it. And if the story is still good and I feel like it's worth it to keep reading, then I'll keep reading.
Mhm.
Or keep watching or whatever it is. If I feel like it's just gratuitous, like trauma porn is like the phrase that I usually say. If I feel like it's trauma porn, then I'm probably gonna stop because it's more harmful for me to continue engaging with it than what I would get out of it. And
Yeah.
I'm trying not to be really mean to myself anymore like that, to like make myself barrel through something even though it's causing me a lot of pain. Um, and so just let me know
Yeah.
if you know, just let me know what like how bad that stuff is. I know you said that like Cersei is worse, and I looked up the trigger list for Cersei, and I'm like, yeah, Cersei is definitely worse.
Mhm.
I've always wanted to like read it because
People
there's
love it.
incest in it.
Yeah.
Of course, I want to read it when there's a book that was published that has like canonical incest in it. That's like, and the person who's going through it is probably like the main character, so you have empathy for that person.
Yeah.
Um, Like, I've always wanted to read Ava Reid books the same way. She's an incest survivor, and all of her books are about that in some way.
Yeah.
I haven't done it yet because I have to like be ready for it, like for that sort of a thing. Um, but yeah, like I want to read these books. I know that they're really good. I know that a lot of people really like them. Just from the 3 chapters we read, Madeline Miller is a very good author,
Mhm.
and so I feel like she's at least worth trying to read it.
Yeah.
Um, I
Well,
am
and we
very
have like heavy subject matter in these first 3 chapters already, but it does feel like there's care in it.
Yeah. I will say, I don't know. So the one thing that I didn't like about these ones was you're not supposed to like it. I get it. Um, was like the way that the dad is so dismissive of the mom, and
Mhm.
it's just like, oh, she could never rule because it comes off as him being like she's just crazy.
Mhm.
Um, I don't like that, but you're not supposed to like the dad. He's horrible. He reminds me of my dad.
Yeah.
With how he uses his kid and just how he doesn't care about anything. Um, so that was an interesting thing, but um, I always think it's interesting with books like this to see like if people notice like the things that are happening in them um, that are because the way that they happen are is like not how most people imagine these like scary things
Mhm.
to be happening. Like I said to you, I was like he's being sex trafficked by his dad.
Yeah.
Like when he's 9. Do people know that? Like, are people
Yeah.
aware that that's what that is? That he's being trafficked by
Yeah.
his
So
dad?
for context for and of course spoiler warnings for the book if you're someone who hasn't read it yet. Um so Patroclus is said to be one of the suitors of Helen, and ages aren't really listed there, but that is separate from what we know of him with the Iliad, which is that he was brought up with Achilles. They trained together. They were somewhat closer in age, although he's still somewhat older. And so I think that's why Madeline Miller blended the two a bit. And it's like, yes, he is barely older than Achilles, but his dad
Mhm,
took him there even though he was a child. And
mhm.
I do like using both of those because it's always so overlooked that he's named as a suitor, which means he would have been obligated to go to Troy anyway, and he wasn't just following Achilles. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it's I really like how do you say his name? I don't wanna say it wrong.
Patroclus. I just say it.
Patroclus?
Yeah.
I tried to, like, watch, like, a video of somebody pronouncing it, but of course I forgot how they said it already. But I really like him as a main character. I like how he's being, like, presented, I guess, like, the
Mhm.
idea that he's seen as, like, this failure by his dad because he's not, like, super strong or tough or good at sports or seen as, like, weak or something.
Mhm.
Um, and I appreciate when, like, the main character hero person that everyone cries over in this book is has complex PTSD. Because I
Yeah.
was like, "Yeah, he literally has, like, PTSD nightmares and, like, flashbacks, and talking about triggers, he has triggers in the first 3 chapters of this book, like, that's towards the end, so we'll talk about it later, but he has triggers that, like, causes, like, emotional and, like, actual flashbacks in him. That's, like, how that stuff actually happens. I always appreciate when people write things how they actually happen instead of the over dramatized way that people sometimes write stuff like this.
Mhm,
Um, but either way, just the way that he knows that his dad doesn't like him.
mhm,
And he just knows that. Like, he knows that his dad doesn't like him. He knows that his dad is disappointed in him, and he
mhm.
hasn't actually done anything. He just, like, literally just exists. And his
Yeah.
dad is disappointed in him because he just isn't what he wanted him to be.
And he's
And
ironically named Patroclus, which is, like Patra, like that part's father, and then Klus
mhm,
is like Kleos, like glory of the father. So,
yeah.
it's so ironic, but yeah, so he has very clearly PTSD from his childhood, from not just himself, but like how his mom is treated, it seems like even. Because
Mhm,
yeah, she's described as simple, and so we have to imagine there's some sort of cognitive thing happening. And so she gets treated like a nobody, and he gets treated like just because he is her son that he also is as well very early on. Like he talked about some games that his dad hosted in their small kingdom where people from other kingdoms came, and that's when he first saw Achilles, and he was just sitting there giving out the prizes while everybody else was like, they're like, why aren't you competing kind of energy. So yeah, he's always felt kind of like he doesn't really matter, even when he was a crowned prince, so to speak.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also a thing of just, like, that he knows, like, "Oh, my dad wants me to be like Achilles,
Mhm.
but I'm not like that guy at all."
Yeah.
And it's just, like, this feeling of his dad thinks that he's, like, bad because he thinks he's similar to, like, his mom or something,
Mhm.
and it's just, like, this very weird dynamic, like, the one I told you that the one scene of him and his mom sitting out by the ocean, I was like, "Am I supposed is there, like, I felt like there was, like, something that I was supposed to understand in that scene that I wasn't understanding.
Yeah.
Um, because one thing about me and, like, the Iliad and the Odyssey is that I know way more about the Odyssey because I always think it's really interesting to see, like, the after effects of war.
Mm.
Like, even back sounds random to bring up Harry Potter right now, but back in, like, the day when I didn't, like, despise JK Rowling with every fiber of my being, I wanted her to write a Harry Potter book or that was based right after the war was over to show them dealing with all of their massive complex PTSD. And, um, when she started being horrible was when I gave up on ever getting something like that. Um, that's always what I think about is, like, how people respond after the traumatic event is over, and so I don't know, like, hardly anything about the Iliad because I think that the war stuff usually isn't the part that interests me, and so I feel like this book is going to be you explaining all these things to me because I don't know that much besides just the bare bones idea of Achilles and, like, how the war ends, of course.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know that much besides that, and so it's really interesting to hear, like, I didn't even know who, like, our main character was
Mhm.
for a while, and then I realized it was him, and I was like, "Oh, no," because I know what happens to him.
Yeah.
And I was like, "Oh god, we're gonna be in his head, no wonder why people cry so much." And
Yeah.
and then when, like, the older guy, I didn't realize that that was Achilles until he said it was Achilles, and I was like, "Oh, I didn't realize that Achilles was that much, like, older than him." And it might just be like we were
No,
saying
he's
about
older than Achilles by like 2 or 3 years.
hmm, I don't know why I didn't realize that at all. Um, that's just things I just don't know.
Yeah.
Um, but it was really interesting to read this stuff of him wanting to be by his mom, but not really being allowed to because she's seen as being weak.
Mhm.
That the one time he's allowed to be by her is when they're just sitting out by the ocean. and I was, like, waiting for, like, Poseidon to show up and do some crazy stuff just
Yeah.
because I was like, "Why are they sitting out by the ocean?" And then I was like, "Oh, never mind."
I don't know, it's almost like they're setting up a parallel between him and Achilles because Thetis has literally seen him, so,
Yeah,
I
I
like
was
to
wondering
imagine
that.
they talk in the ocean.
Yeah, like, I was wondering after they introduced that stuff, and you told me about that before I even started reading it, but, um, I was wondering about that if they were doing a whole, because it is very much the same story,
Mhm.
and I guess, like, the thing I said to you was, like, nobody in these chapters have consent or, like, agency
Yeah,
or anything at all. It's all coercion and pressure and societal pressure forcing them to do things. Like his mom, there's no way that his mom wants to be with his dad. She was
yeah.
definitely like forced to do that. And it's the same thing with Thetis. Although that story, we know that story. We don't know what happened with his mom.
Well, yeah,
Um,
the Thetis story gets, like, so sanitized the way that it's told that it doesn't register quite the way that it's written there. Where, like, yeah, you are told that he's, Peleus is supposed to hold her down and she changes a bunch of shapes, and like that's part of the whole deal. But you don't stop to think, like, and what was it like for her after that? Because she actually had to literally marry him. And
yeah.
yeah, and then had a child with him. And only had one child. So, like, what's happening there? Um, yeah, and I do kind of like it doesn't sanitize it as much. Like I said, it's a lot more shocking to read it the way that it's written there, but at the same time, none of it feels like, oh, poor Thetis, or like, like it feels very realistic to,
Mhm.
like, yes, this happened to her, but she took her power back the moment that she could get away from him. She got away and she only comes back to see her son. Like, that sounds like she took her power back to me, at least.
And also, like, it's being told from the perspective of like a young boy.
Mhm,
And so he would see it like that, like of just matter of fact kind of stating like this is what happened. But like for other people who would read that and just be like, what do you mean the gods like helped him hold somebody down so he could rape them?
mhm.
Like when I was reading that, I was like, why does anybody like the gods? Like why? Why are
And
there
yeah.
Why are there Hellenist polytheism, Hellenistic people who always show up to be rancid to me about why do you like the gods? Why would you
What's
want to worship them?
What's even worse is, like, the reason why it was Peleus was because she was fated to have a son that's more powerful than his father, and Zeus and Poseidon were both kind of fighting over her. And when they found out she had this prophecy over her, like, they were just like, "Oh, we'll give her to a mortal man then." So it
Yeah,
was, yeah,
she's literally like a plaything. Like she's
yeah.
not a person. She doesn't have her own opinions or thoughts or agency or anything. She's literally just like a play toy for them of like, "Oh, well, we don't want her, so you can have her, I guess."
Mhm.
And like we're going to sit here and help you, give you tips about how to trap her so that you can rape her and impregnate her before she can get away from you,
Yeah.
so that you can have like a powerful son. Like I was just reading that like, why do people worship the Greek gods? Like why would you want to be like somebody like this who would do this to somebody and think that it's fine?
Mhm.
Like that's horrific.
Yeah.
And I was just like, okay, am I not supposed to be horrified by this? Because
I can't explain the appeal of Hellenistic polytheism. And, like, I'll generally respect it a little bit. Like, I respect it more than Christianity, I'll say that, because at least you know that your gods are kind of monstrous
mhm.
and you're not trying to pretend they're not. Although I'm sure they would use words like vengeful rather than monstrous. But yeah, uh, I don't understand that. And so anyways, yeah, what we know, and the way that Patroclus says all of this is like, it's rumored that Achilles' mom is a goddess. It's rumored that this
Mhm.
is how it happened. So we don't have a clear idea yet on how the divine is treated in this. which I'm interested to see because I mean, like the most famous taking the divine out of the Iliad example is the movie Troy, where even though they have like a Thetis scene, it's just like, oh, she's a hippie lady on like a rock in the water. We're not going to acknowledge at all that she's supposed to be a goddess. Um,
I feel like we should watch that movie together sometime
yes.
because because I loved that movie purely
Yeah.
because it was a Greek mythology movie and Orlando Bloom was in it.
He
Which
plays
it
the
was like
worst character though.
I know, but it was one of so I was telling you before we started we were talking about Sebastian Stan finally winning a Golden Globe. The way that I am with like actors that I like is like I just like an actor a lot and they just like have like a certain style that I just really like and I just like follow them around for the rest of their career. And Orlando Bloom had just been in Lord of the Rings. That was like Troy was like one of the first movies he did outside of Lord of the Rings,
Mhm.
and so I went to watch it. Like that he's also the reason why I watched Pirates of the Caribbean. I
Yeah.
didn't give a fuck about Johnny Depp. Even
Yeah.
back then, I always watched them for his character and that's he's in the movies that I liked.
Mhm.
And because I liked him as an actor and I still do. But either way, like that's why I watched that movie a lot and I also just like Greek mythology. And so I was like, I'm going to watch this movie 4,000 times. But I haven't seen it. Like I used to take turns watching that movie and Gladiator, which are like
Mm.
different mythology times but similar enough. And I would just go back and forth between those two movies. And now I'm like honestly curious what I would think about it now because it's been so long since I've watched it that I feel like I wouldn't like it as much, but I would still probably enjoy it for just being like a like a bad fun movie, you know?
Mhm.
Um, but I that's like the only thing from like the Iliad that I have any memory of, and most of that is just Brad Pitt, and everyone was obsessed with Brad Pitt having washboard abs, and
Yeah.
that's all I remember. And I was just like, can everyone relax? Like,
And
like I
that
don't
was
care.
they changed Patroclus is supposed to be his cousin, and there might
Oh
be
yeah.
some truth to them being kinsmen, but, like, distantly related kinsmen kind of thing. Um, yeah, anyways, so, yeah, we get some of the events that happen in the first 3 chapters are, as we said, the oath to Tyndareus, which is what happens with the suitors when they're afraid to name a suitor for Helen because she's such a big prize. And so they make all the men swear an oath to protect the marriage. Um, and then the next big event that happens is his exile. And the way it goes down, we know about this from when his ghost appears to Achilles at the end of the Iliad. And what we know is just there was a dispute over a game of dice. Like there's not details as to how it happened. So Madeline Miller kind of wrote it. Someone wanted to play with his dice that was kind of a bully kid and he really didn't wasn't having it that day. And so instead of like backing down like he would usually do, he actually fought back and he pushed him and the kid landed on a rock. Um,
Mhm.
and it was accidental. He was horrified when he did it. It was not meant to be that malicious at all. And this poor kid, who already seems to be having a very bad childhood, then gets sent off. What we didn't get from this version of the story is Peleus and I always forget how to say his dad's name. It's something like Menodius or something like that. Their connection is that they were both Argonauts. They both sailed with Jason on the Argo to get the Golden Fleece. So that is how they knew each other. And so that's how they made the arrangement of like, yeah, my son has to go to exile. Can he go to your kingdom? And the Pythia, where Peleus lives, is a much smaller kingdom. It's not that great. I think they do say that in the Madeline Miller book, so it's kind of
Mhm.
like downgrading. And we learn from like once he gets there, the reason why Peleus is okay taking in stray children is because he's building an army.
Yeah, that's one way to like build up an army full of like foster children.
Yeah.
Um, the thing from that part that I just like the scene when he is at like by Helen and
Mhm.
his dad takes him there and that stuff I liked because that's accurate to when you have, like, an abusive monster like that as a dad, that everyone else that was there was like, "Why are you here?" And, like,
Mhm,
why is, like, your son here? Why are you, like, having your son compete to marry her when he's 9?
mhm.
And, like, Odysseus is there being like, "What's wrong with you?"
Yeah,
And things like that, basically, in, like, nice words, but that's basically what he's saying is like, "What's going on over there? What's happening, guys? Like, why are you making these really weird parenting choices? This doesn't seem like a good idea to, like, force your son to come here, and if you get what you want, he, like, just is, like, betrothed to somebody when he's in 4th grade and has no idea, could never have any idea what's going on. There's no way he could have ever actually chosen to do this, and especially how, like, terrified he is that he's gonna, like, mess something up, that he's just glad that he said what his dad told him to say without, like, mixing up any of the words, and he didn't, like, trip or fall over when he was, like, walking up and giving, like, the gift and stuff, and I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, that's all you can actually hope for in a situation like that is that you don't do anything outwardly that they can, like, use against you later."
yeah,
Um,
like, hope
but
the other
it
will point out the delusion.
yeah, and just remind I thought that part was interesting of just people around his dad noticing that, like, "You're a little bit of a weirdo." Like, it's weird that you're, like, bragging about how much money you have and things like that, and, like, but you're also trying to sell your son. Like, you're trying to sex traffic your child, but
Essentially.
you're talking that's it's literally sex trafficking. Like, if you're making money off of that's literally what people do when they are trafficked. Like, this is like a whole big thing that I rant about all the time because people don't know what trafficking is. But honestly and truly, the majority of the time when people are trafficked, it's by their family members or like a boyfriend or something. But most of the time, if you're a child, it's a family member and they just want money
Mhm,
and they use you to get money. They don't care about you, and you feel like you have to do it so that they get money.
mhm,
Um, that's like the one thing that my dad didn't do, but I kind of felt like I was anyway.
mhm,
It's hard to describe if you've never gone through that before, but I felt like I was anyway because I was like taking care of his mood
mhm,
in a way, like so I couldn't if I told him no, then he would like abuse my other family members.
mhm,
And so it was like, how I can't actually tell him no then. And so even though I didn't make like money off of like what I was doing, it still felt like I was being trafficked like that. And that is what his dad is doing. He's like, "Oh, see zero worth for my son as a human being. The only way that I think that I can make anything off of this person existing in my life is if I sell him. And
yeah,
I make money off of forcing him to be married to somebody that's like a lot older than him that that doesn't under that he could never understand what's happening, but I don't care because I want to make money off of him because I he doesn't think that he has any worth as a person outside of what he can make off of him.
yeah,
And that's trafficking. That's what that is, and I hope that people understand that that's what that is. I know that that's one of, like, the trigger warnings for this book, but it's honestly kind of like a litmus test for me to see if people figure out when there's trafficking in books or media or whatever in
mhm,
this way, like, the actual way that it happens, if they even understand what is happening.
yeah,
Sometimes they don't because they've been so brainwashed by like Operation Underground Railroad in 2020. But I thought that was really interesting to show his dad doing that, and then especially when he accidentally kills. I don't even want to say that he kills the kid because he didn't have like malice
mhm,
or like he wasn't trying to do that.
yeah,
Um, the kid just like dies. It's an accident, but just like the way that they find him underneath the tree and he's like puked and but nobody tries to even comfort him.
mhm,
Nobody asks him if he's okay. They're, like, annoyed by the fact that he's, like, traumatized and upset because they're mad at him because the kid that everybody liked more is dead.
yeah, and
And
his
so,
dad
like
even, like, remarks that it's easier to lose the or I don't think his dad literally says it, but he says he knows his dad thought it was a better trade-off to lose his weight in treasure for someone else to take him into exile than for him to try to argue like this killing was somehow justified or to get him, like forgiven for what was a pretty freak accident.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And it is, and, like, some of the things that epic people said that bothered me was they would talk about ancient times things as if it only happens in ancient times, and it was really weird to see people using that sort of excuse, like, that sort of thinking of, like, "Oh, he had to include rape because that happened to women back then," and I'm like, "That happens now. Why are
Mhm.
you acting like it doesn't happen now?" And, or, like, people were more likely to do it back then or something, and I'm like, "It happens the same amount right now as
Yeah.
it did thousands of years ago. Can we not be delusional about our own society?" Um, and this reminded me of that in the way that, like, this is a child
Mhm.
and nobody treats him like he's a human being. And most of the time, honestly, people don't treat children like they are human. They expect them to be like somehow the most mature people in the room because the way that people talk to them, nobody would ever talk to anyone else that way. And that reminded me of this. Like, nobody sits there and asks him if he's okay after he accidentally kind of killed somebody. And then he's just like sent away to
Mhm.
a new place and it's just like expected to like blend in and assimilate. And it's just like looked at as a problem. Like, everything about him is just a problem. And nobody knows where he's supposed to go or fit in. And nobody looks at him like he's an actual person.
Yeah.
Like, you know why he's in this new place, and nobody's asking him if he's okay.
Well, and I
Like,
have to wonder with how superstitious they were. Like, no one's even taking care, spiritual care of him. Of like, he has blood on his hands. Like, we need to purify him, or bad things are going to follow us. Like, no one's even doing that, which is like just a superstitious bare minimum in this case.
mhm,
Like if we want to talk about what things were really like is it accurate the exile or we want to kill your son too or whatever his consequence may be? Sure, yeah, it is. But I don't know that I would want to take a servant into my house who has like a blood debt on their hands, like spiritually
yeah.
speaking.
Well, yeah, especially because if you look at what happens in our society now, like, people really want children to go to prison for the rest of their life.
Mhm.
I don't know why they want that, but they do. Um, like, there's just in where I live, there was a story, like, a year ago about a 10-year-old boy that, like, stabbed his mother, I think, to death.
Mhm.
And in the story, in like the news article, like the day that it happened, the other family members in the house were saying that there was always something wrong with him. And I was like, "You were abusing that child.
Yeah.
You were abusing that child. What did you do to him?" Because no 10-year-old child does this kind of stuff. And I saw an article about him on trial recently where they were talking about all the stuff that they did that where they abused him and they're wanting to like that kid was 10 and they're trying to sentence him for life in prison um because the state that I live in doesn't have the death penalty, thank god. But still, like, that's insane to think that something that you do when you're that little could like make you be stuck in a place like that for the rest of your life when you're so young.
Mhm.
There's no way that you could grasp what you even did or anything like that.
Yeah.
And so it's that sort of an idea, the idea that something he did that was an accident. And it's also like a thing in a book like this that has like these big bad warriors and stuff, that he's supposed to want to be like one day. That people are treating him like he's a horrible problem because he did it on accident. But if he killed people on a battlefield, they would think that he was fine.
Yeah.
And it's like he has a blood debt against him because he did it as a mistake. But if he did it on purpose, would you like him more? Like, that is just so weird. But that's very obviously how they feel, and that's how a lot of people feel, like, to talk about our politics right now, that's why people like Luigi,
Mhm.
is because he finally, like, hurt the people that are actually hurting everyone,
Yeah.
and him doing that as is seen as more monstrous than the guy that was like literally killing millions of people every year.
Mhm.
That's why people like him because we're like, but the guy that he killed was actually hurting way more people. It's just that he was sitting in an office when he was doing it, as opposed to like physically doing it himself. I don't
Yeah.
know why, because he got to do it from an office, that he should get away with it. And it's like that sort of an idea of why do you get away with it when you're like in a situation where you're supposed to do it? But if you do it on accident or something, then you're seen as a really bad person that gets like sent off for the rest of your life and
Yeah.
will never see your home or your family or anyone ever again just because somebody was trying to bully you and
Yeah.
you just like push them the exact wrong way. It's not
Well,
even
and
something malicious or something, you know?
murder could be written off as justified back then a little bit more easily because, like, it was not a formal jury trial like it is here, and
Mhm.
even when it was a jury trial, it was very, very, like, emotional. Like, they would have people come and wail and cry and stuff. 100% the juries got fucked with in ancient Greece
Yeah.
when they did finally have jury trials.
Mhm.
But that being said, like, yes, there were ways to have this deed seen in a different way even back then of arguing like, maybe he could have said he was trying to steal my dice or something like that, and people would have been like, oh, okay, well, this all happened because like it was that turn of events, and people would have understood it a little bit more, or at least had
Mhm.
more forgiveness for him as a person, but his dad
Mhm.
just didn't even bother.
No. And it's also like a thing of he told the truth.
Mhm,
He could have lied and
mhm,
said that the kid tried to fight him or something,
mhm.
but he didn't wanna do that. And
Yeah.
so the one my phone's gonna die soon, but the one thing that I wanted to say too from this that I thought was interesting is how they talk about the gods.
Mhm,
Um, how they talked about how if you were, like, related to a god, that you were seen as, like, more powerful and
mhm.
amazing and somebody that they wanted to be, and I thought that that was really interesting, um, because one thing that I thought was interesting about the epic stuff was some people were talking about like acting like I only knew things about mythology because of Rick Riordan books or Percy Jackson books. And it's like I'm an adult. Like I was 25 before I read any of those books because I'm old.
Yeah.
But it was also like they were getting it backwards. Like they were thinking like I see the gods this way because I read Percy Jackson books and it's like no, I read Percy Jackson books because they talk about the gods this way.
Mhm.
Like the gods are always the villains to me, and I can vividly remember like reading the first Percy Jackson book and being so excited that somebody was seeing them the way that I see them, that most people don't write them that way. Most of the time they're seen as like the hero or whatever in the books or in the movie or whatever. You're supposed to want to be like them. And so I was so happy to find something where they were showing them how I saw them. And
Yeah.
so reading a book like this where people are like seen as having higher stature because they're related to them was I was just like, "Well, this is so weird," because this is just like not how I see any of this stuff. Like if you were related to one of the Greek gods, I would be afraid of you. If you liked your parent at least or like wanted to be like them, and wanted to be a part of that world, I would be afraid of you because of how they are. Um, it
I
was
mean,
really
well, so fear, and this is a very Greek thing. So do you know that the word for terrible and the word for like awesome is the same word in Greek?
mm,
Dinos. It's
mhm.
where like the part where people say that dinosaur means terrible lizard.
Oh, yeah.
The first part of that, it can mean both terrible and awesome. And like the way that I've had professors describe it to me is like kind of how awful and awesome are plays on each other where you have the AF in the beginning. And it's like you could be full of awe in a bad way or you could be
Mhm,
full of awe in a good way. That's the gods. Like that's the gods right there.
mhm. Yeah, and I just thought it was so interesting how he was like and he like knew all this about these people, like, oh, that's this person, and they're related to this god, and they're rumored to be part of this. And I'm like, so if you want to get like a position in this world, do you just start a rumor about yourself that you're related to one of the gods?
Probably.
Because it seems like it makes sense. Like it's like the people that show up on TikTok that are like, I'm cousins like twice removed 4 times with Tom Holland.
Like, yeah,
But
sure you are.
it's like it's the same idea of that sort of a thing. Like they have all the power and like influence in the world, and so people want to be connected to them.
Yeah.
Um, so that people respect them and they can get things that they want easier by bringing that up. It's like the whole it's the ultimate nepo babies.
Yeah. So to kind of wrap this up, because my phone's dying too, YouTube Live really sucks your battery.
Yeah.
Um, so where we end off on the end of the 3 chapters is Patroclus is now in this like training camp for boys that Peleus seems to be running. He does have kids who try to interact with him at first, but he's not ready for that. Like, and he's having PTSD nightmares of the boy who he accidentally
Oh,
murdered.
yeah. That
Yeah.
was, like, the one thing that I wanted to mention was it was really nice to see an author write that very accurate to life how this, like, small thing happens, like, just, like, the texture of food, and it just immediately makes him think about that, and then he can't sleep or, like, eat anything for, like, days. That's exactly how that happens.
Yeah.
Like, exactly how that happens. And it's so wild when you're going through it because it's like it's really hard to explain that to people, to be like, "Oh, I saw a texture on food and now I can't sleep and I can't eat anything."
Hmm.
Um, I promise I'm not crazy.
Yeah.
But it was just it shows, like, how much that stuff, like, just stay it that's why, like, the people who say, like, "Handle your triggers," I'm like, "You don't even know what you're saying," because if you've had enough traumatic experiences, there are so many triggers, they like just stack on top of each other. It's
Hmm.
impossible to ever handle all of them, especially because you don't know sometimes what one is. And
Yeah.
it's just like the smallest stuff sometimes. Like there's food that I will never eat, and I don't even tell people what the food is because it makes me wanna, like, scream even, like, telling somebody what it like, I even told my therapist what it is, what they are, but there's, like, certain foods that I just refuse to eat because it just reminds me of that, and every time I see them when other people are eating them, that's what I think about,
Hmm.
and that's what it makes me think of and make me remember, and I don't want to, and it's like what are you supposed to do? You're sitting out at like a restaurant or like you're over at somebody's house and they're just like eating lunch or something. And that's what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
And it's like you can't tell them why because then you would have to explain why nobody and they don't actually want to know. And you don't want to have to tell them. And so you're just like sitting there. And that's exactly what he's doing. Like, everyone thinks he's just kind of probably being an antisocial kid or whatever or weird, but it's like, no, he's just having, like, debilitating, like, traumatic flashbacks and doesn't know how to deal with it, and so he's just staying by himself until they stop.
Yeah. Yeah. So where we're at, it is kind of poor Patroclus, but in a way that feels realistic, in a way that feels like at least the author cares about him.
Mhm,
And yeah, in a way that it just aligns with our experience of trauma.
mhm. Even Achilles seems nice. He's just like, "Oh, you're a nice person."
Yeah. He's just kind of blah at the moment. It's
Mhm,
like, oh, there's this really beautiful, cool kid. But he doesn't really seem that invested in anything yet.
mhm.
And so I'm curious to see how that goes too. But
Yeah.
yeah, so we'll stick with this book for a while. If there is anything that you think would be a major trigger for us, please let us know. Comments, messages, whatever. Um, we probably won't do Cersei back to back because at some point we are going to have to start Battle of the Labyrinth.
Yeah,
But
and that
yeah,
I
we'll
am
make
ex
this detour.
I am excited about reading Battle of the Labyrinth again, but I just know that book is, like, just as, like, serious sometimes, it sounds crazy to say that, as this one because it is even though it's, like, a kid's series, there's lots of just a lot of stuff that
Yeah.
happens in that book that I know it's gonna be really hard to read again, um, And so I'm just avoiding it until we act honestly, after the epic stuff, I was like, I like physically cannot handle people being mad at me about something else. And I know that people won't like some of the stuff that I say about Annabeth in that book. Um, because she is all over the place
Mhm.
in that book. Like it makes sense she's being groomed. And I just wish that she would stop getting groomed for once and for all, for God's sake. But you are a huge mess when you're being groomed, and so it's very accurate to the experience, but it's hard to read at the same time. And it's one of those things of even when you're being abused, the way that you treat other people still they still have a reason to be upset with you.
Yeah.
Um, even if you have a reason for why you're acting that way. And so I'm just avoiding that for a while because I don't want to deal with that again for a little
Hopefully,
while.
yeah, on a lesser sphere than Epic, because at least the Percy Jackson fandom doesn't get as bad.
No, they're
No other
very
fandom has
irrational.
been like this. Maybe Nicki Minaj's fandom. That's about it.
Yeah, and honestly, like TikTok is probably going to go away soon anyway. And so if the Song of Achilles people get mad at us if we don't like it, they won't be able to find us probably. So they'll be fine.
Yeah, I wanna like this one because I know people love the queer themes with it and stuff. I know some of it's gonna be hard, but
Hmm.
I'm hoping I do like this one. I
I
will
do
go in
too,
saying that.
especially because she's the one that's writing the a Persephone book that's supposed to come out
Yeah.
in this year sometime. I think it's she's very like secretive that way because she's such a big author that she just posts and says this book is coming out this day, and that's all she has to do to promote it. Like to do that. So we don't. No one really knows, but there's all these blogs about how it's supposed to come out this year, and
Mhm,
she has posted things that are very empathetic towards Persephone and Hades, and
mhm,
like talking about like that Hades isn't a crazy monster. Um, and that actually he was actually nice to her because he didn't go let her go with him until his dad said that it was her dad said that it was okay. So like he wasn't just going to take her.
mhm.
He like wanted some sort of consent before doing it with her, and even then it's still not the like monstrous way that people imagine it to be.
Yeah.
And so that's a good sign for an author. So I want to really like her books because people really like them.
Mhm.
Um, and they obviously are just from what we read already, they're written really well.
Yeah.
So I want to enjoy them.
Yeah, so we're gonna try with this for a little while, and hopefully we don't have any more situations.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Yeah, so we're both gonna go because YouTube Live for some reason it sucks up battery like crazy. Like I'm on a charger and it's still going down.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
I'm gonna have to get a new charger.
yeah, we're gonna have to figure out our charger situation with this. But so for next week we'll read a few more chapters of it, and yeah, just let us know if you guys have thoughts about Song of Achilles. Don't worry about spoilers because obviously we know what theoretically
Yeah,
happened. So yeah,
yeah.
you can't
Don't
spoil
worry
it
about
too
it.
bad. We know he dies. Like,
Yeah.
do we need anything else?
If you are alive on the internet, you know that about this book.
Yes. So, yeah, and we know that it's a queer romance. So,
Yes.
yeah, you're not spoiling any of that for us.
No.
All right. But yeah, we're gonna go, and we will see you guys next week for more Song of Achilles and maybe show news. All right.
Bye.
Bye.